Story time. So when I was 8 years old, my family and I went to this authentic Chinese restaurant in Pennsylvania, the type where they barely speak English. Like, it's very authentic, you know? And so we walk in and we have a seat, and then like the manager of the place, who was like an old, like 70-year-old Chinese lady, comes over to me and sees my beauty mark freckle thing on my face, and she starts yelling at me. Oh, in China, that's disgrace. If we get that removed in China, nobody like you. You ugly. I mean, I'm just trying to eat my fried rice. And she's standing there calling me ugly, and I'm 8 years old. I was just like, and I was only 8, so I started crying at the dinner table. And then my dad orders hot and sour chicken, and it wasn't hot and sour enough. So that was on top of the manager of the restaurant calling me ugly, and he did not like. Need I remind you, I'm adopted from China, so I've lived in America, and I didn't think there was a problem with my face. And so my dad was pissed. So when the check came, he tipped them 3 cents. And as we're leaving, the waiter comes out and sees it. So he tries to fight us, starts cursing us out in Chinese. My dad flicks him off, and that's the end. We've never been back. But the fried rice was good. Solve this riddle and you're super smart. Credits to the girl who sent me this riddle. Her name is Evie and she remembers it from 1st grade. Some of you may have heard of this riddle, but there's a man and he has to take a goat, a cabbage, and a wolf across a river in a rowboat. And the rowboat only has enough room for one of those things at a time. If he takes the cabbage first, he will leave the wolf with the goat and the wolf will eat the goat. If he takes the wolf first, he leaves the goat with the cabbage and the goat will eat the cabbage. Only when the man is present, the cabbage and the goat are safe from their enemies. With that said, he manages to get all of them to the other side safely. How does he do it? Pause this video right now and comment what you think before I tell you the answer. So the answer is he took the goat first and left him there. Then he took the cabbage and left it there, but then took the goat back, so the cabbage was safe from the goat. Then he took the wolf over, so the wolf and the cabbage were together, that's not a problem. And then he went back and got the goat for a second time. If you have a riddle that you would like to share, then follow my Instagram and DM me. Psychology tricks that I learned in my psychology classes. So if you're ever with like a group of friends and it's just really awkward and just no one's talking, it's just really uncomfortable, eat. When you're chewing, your brain thinks that you are safe because you wouldn't be eating if you were nervous or unsafe. Eating is actually a very calming activity, and people who eat normally feel comfortable and safe in their environment. So by breaking out like the pizza or the popcorn or the chips, people are probably more likely to talk and feel more comfortable. So it's not that awkward. And also you have pizza, so this also goes for being nervous in general. So if you're nervous, chew some gum. By chewing gum or eating food, it tricks your brain into thinking that you are in a very safe environment and there's no reason to be nervous because you're eating. Because your brain thinks that you wouldn't be eating if you were in a dangerous situation. But as many of you can see, that is also why a lot of people binge eat or eat when they're sad and then gain a lot of weight. It's because it actually just makes them feel better. It makes them feel safe. Now I'm hungry. Here are some psychology tricks that I have learned in my psychology classes. So if you ever ask somebody to tell you something and they partially tell you and then they look really awkward and like uncomfortable, then they're not telling you the whole thing. And to get them to tell you the whole thing, all you have to do is just sit there and keep staring at them. Like you're expecting more, just keep staring. They will probably stay silent for like a few seconds and then they get really uncomfortable and they will probably just start talking to make it less uncomfortable. Sometimes, like if they're hiding a secret, for an example, you being silent and just staring at them makes them think that you know something. Another thing that I learned that makes people really uncomfortable is when you don't make eye contact with them, but you look at their forehead as if like something's on their forehead. Like you just look at their forehead. It makes them so uncomfortable. And when they ask you why you're looking at their forehead, you say, what are you talking about? Like, I'm not. I use it on my neighbors. These strangest unsolved mysteries from each state. Today we have Arkansas. On August 23rd, 1987, Kevin Ives and Don Henry both went hunting together in a wooded area. They were near some train tracks, which was also very close to Don's house in Bryant, Arkansas. A train was making its usual night run to Little Rock when the engineer noticed something very strange. There were 2 boys lying on the train tracks, but despite all of the honking, they wouldn't get up or even move a muscle, and so he tried to emergency brake, but it didn't work and he ended up hitting them and killing them. A medical examiner determined that they were really high and they had smoked about 20 joints. But when both of these boys' families were told that, they didn't believe it. When they were killed, they were covered in light green tarp with Don's rifle next to them on the ground. Don's family said that he would have never left his rifle on the ground to get scratched, and that no matter how high they were, they would have woken up to all of the honking and the noise. Kevin's family hired a private investigator, and every time he would try to talk to the cops, they'd be so unwilling and resistant to talk to him. A different autopsy was conducted, and it turns out they only smoked 1 to 3 joints, and they were dead before they were even hit. The strangest unsolved mysteries from each state. Today, by popular demand, we have Oregon. And yeah, it's Oregon, so I could tell you about Bigfoot or Ted Bundy, but we're gonna do something a little more interesting. I am going to tell you about the Little Lava Lake murders. Blech. Ed, Roy, and Dewey were all trappers, and for 3 months in the winter, they would stay in their cabin at Little Lava Lake and do their job. When spring came around, friends and family of the men would come up and visit them. And when they all arrived, the 3 men would normally greet them, but it didn't happen this time. While everybody was looking for them, somebody ventured into the trapper's shed and found a blood-stained hammer. As they looked more, they discovered a patch of snow with blood in it. And as they dug down a few inches deeper, in the slush was a human tooth mixed with human hair. Once the snow had melted, they were walking on the ice that was covering the lake, and they discovered a hole that had been dug in the ice, and that is where they disposed of the bodies. That hole had been cut in the dead of winter. The bodies were wrapped in muslin and, I quote, fiendishly butchered. I'm running out of time, but part 2 is coming right now. The strangest unsolved mysteries from each state. This is part 2 of the Little Lava Lake murders in Oregon. So yes, the friends and the family of these 3 men went out looking for them, and they found them underneath the ice. Somebody had clearly murdered them and put them there. Ed was found with his reading glasses still on, and a shotgun had taken away part of his jaw and his chest, and a watch was found in his coat pocket, and it stopped 10 minutes after 9. Roy was found with a bullet behind his ear, and his shoulder had almost been fully taken away by a shotgun. Dewey was found with a hole behind his ear that was bigger than a silver dollar, and it was just crushing his skull. Charles Kimsey was the main suspect, and he actually was a former employee of the Lake Lodge and also threatened to get even with these men after a petty argument. He was also wanted in the county for assault and armed robbery. And in 1915, he escaped from the Idaho State Penitentiary and had many brutal crimes behind him. And in 1923, he hired a cab driver to take him from Oregon to Idaho and then poisoned him and threw him into an abandoned well. But there was not enough evidence to convict him of these lake murders. Do you think my man's Charles did it? The strangest unsolved mysteries from each state. Today, by popular demand, we have Maryland. This is a picture of Daniel Beckwith, who hired Askia Kafra to dig these unexplained, mysterious tunnels deep in his basement of his home in Bethesda, Maryland. And one day, the police get a call that there's a fire in Daniel's house. So when they arrive, they see Daniel standing outside of the house. And when the fire investigators go and investigate, they find this hole in the concrete floor of his basement. And so when they explored a little more, they find Askia's body down there. The detective said that these tunnels were at least 20 feet below the surface and at least 200 feet long. Daniel was not doing this legally, and he knew that he had Askia working in very unsafe working conditions. Again, not legal. Daniel claims that he picked up Askia from his house in Silver Spring, Maryland, and then drove him to Manassas, Virginia, which is very close to where I live, with these darkened blackout sunglasses on, so that he wouldn't know where he's going. But according to the police, he never actually did that and just drove him to his house in Bethesda and only let him take off the sunglasses once he was in the basement. And Daniel was charged with involuntary manslaughter. Do you think he did it on purpose? The strangest unsolved mysteries from each state. Today, we have Massachusetts. This all began in October of 1939 in Provincetown on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. A bunch of children started claiming that this very tall, 8-foot figure would jump out at them, growl at them ominously, and then disappear in like a flash. These children said the figure had a deformed face and glowing eyes. Since this was in October, a lot of parents thought this was a Halloween prank and they didn't believe their kid until a grown woman named Mary Costa was walking the streets at night and an 8-foot figure jumped out of the bushes in front of her. It frightened her and then fled, doing these jumps and these leaps that no human could possibly do. She ran into a local coffee shop and told everybody what she saw, and the men went out looking for this thing, but they couldn't find anything. Witnesses claimed that this figure could jump at least 10 feet over these fences and run away. Also said it had a very unsettling laugh and unearthly tone. One man named Charles Farley actually saw the creature and shot it with a gun and ended up hitting it. The creature was just unfazed, it laughed, and then jumped over a fence in one leap. Running out of time, but part 2 is coming right now. The strangest unsolved mysteries from each state. This is part 2 of Massachusetts. Another man claimed that he was confronted and cornered by this entity, and instinctively he threw a punch at him, and the black figure grabbed his hand and crushed it and broke his hand. And a lot of other people claim that through his mouth he would spit blue fire at them. Everybody called this figure the Black Flash of Provincetown. At first, everybody thought it was some Halloween prank because it was around October when it started, but then this continued for another 6 years. Then people started speculating that it was some demon or some supernatural entity, and a lot of religious people thought it was the devil himself. At first, the police did not really take this seriously until in 1945, a group of policemen saw this figure jump 10 feet in the air over a fence into a schoolyard. But eventually, a man named Louis Gennard allegedly threw a pot of boiling water at this creature, and it started screaming and ran off in the night, and nobody saw him ever again. Personally, I believe in this stuff, but I want to know what you guys think. Was it a prank or was this a real thing?